When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB Newsroom. Former Home Secretary Dame Priti Patel has told GB News the government needs to clamp down on lefty lawyers to stop illegal migration. She says the Attorney General and Lord Chancellor need to take action over how law firms behave. That says the number of channel crossings continues to climb, with more than 14,700 people intercepted in small boats so far this year. Dame Priti warns the clock is ticking for the government to implement its new illegal migration bill.
We need a deterrent factor for a start, and removals and returns. My Rwanda plan was central to that. The returns agreements that, I have put in place and others are now putting in place. We have to get planes leaving the country and show that if you come here illegally, you can't just get a free pass. Being firm is actually the stance that we should take, and that means removing people and returning people to other third countries or country of origin.
Dame Priti also spoke to Camilla Tominey about the net zero target, saying the government needs to press pause on the 2050 climate goal.
Public are not ready for this, and importantly, we cannot just have the state, the government, central government, just sort of saying across, again, institutions, local councils, county councils, these are the targets that you have to meet when we don't have the technology, we're not ready. Now, if we want a sensible conversation about climate and the impact of climate change, recognising there are problems is one thing, absolutely, but making sure that we have the tools and the ability that doesn't impose costs and taxes on ordinary people.
The Energy and Security Secretary says he and his family have struggled to open accounts at major banks in the wake of the Nigel Farage row. Grant Shapps told The Sun the problem stems from being a politically exposed person. He accused the banks of going too far. It comes as Mr Farage launched a new website to help people who, like him, have had their bank accounts forcibly closed. The GB News presenter says 1,000 accounts are being shut every day.
What I've learned in the 3 weeks since I came out, as it were, I've just been inundated by small businesses, by folk all around the country, people in absolute fear, terror, lives being ruined, thousands of businesses being closed.
The Prime Minister is ordering a review into the rollout of low-traffic neighbourhoods. The scheme, which has been used by councils to stop drivers cutting through residential areas, has been seen by some as an attack on motorists. In an interview with the Sunday Telegraph, Rishi Sunak said he supports people's right to use their cars to do all the things that matter to them. Shadow International Trade Secretary Nick Thomas-Symonds says the Prime Minister should leave the decision to local areas.
Our position is that it is for communities to make these decisions, whether it is in terms of low traffic neighbourhoods, where, by the way, there are communities up and down the country who want to reduce traffic going through their neighbourhoods, whether it is in terms of clean air zones. We've talked obviously specifically about ULEZ. Yes, we certainly believe a well-planned low traffic neighbourhood is a good thing.
At least 40 people have been killed following an explosion at a political rally in Pakistan. A suicide bomber detonated a device at a convention of the conservative JUIF party, which has links to hardline political Islam. Around 130 people were also injured in the blast, which occurred in the northwest of the country. A state of emergency has been declared by local hospitals. The HS2 programme has been given a red rating by the infrastructure watchdog. It believes the timetable for construction of the first two phases of the rail line from London to Birmingham and then on to Crewe are unachievable. The IPA's annual report, which follows the resignation of Chief Executive Mark Thurston, cites major issues with the schedule and budget. HS2 was initially slated to open in 2026, but this has now been delayed by up to 7 years. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. You're with GB News. Now it's time for the Camilla Tominey Show.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. In just a moment, I'll be speaking to Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary. Should the government ditch net zero and the ban on petrol and diesel vehicles? Will this government ever stop the boats? I'll be putting all that and more to her. Now in the studio, GB News presenter and former leader of the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage. Crumbs, you've had quite the week, haven't you?
It's been a very busy week. Yes, I've stumbled upon something.
You have too.
Yeah, I didn't pick this fight.
No, I know.
This fight picked me. It was when I was annoyed that the accounts were being closed. I'd been with the banking group for 43 years, done nothing wrong whatsoever. But it wasn't until I got my subject access request back. And now, I'd never heard of a subject access request until 2 months ago. But when I was told I could go to the bank to find out what personal data they had on me, and when it became clear I was being debanked purely for political views, that was when I decided, you know what? I'm not going to take this.
No.
If they want to fight, they can have one. So I've got into this fight, and what I've learned is, and we see Grant Shapps today in The Sun on Sunday.
Does that surprise you?
No, not at all,
No,
saying that
you've heard
he
from so many people.
and his children, his family have been very badly affected by his political status. You see Aaron Banks in the Mail on Sunday, a business with 500,000 customers.
Yes.
Just literally told we're closing the accounts.
You knew about that at the time, but he didn't come forward. Why?
Well, no one did. You see, this is the point. Nobody with profile who's been debanked has come forward. 2 reasons. One, a sense of shame, humiliation and embarrassment. But secondly, it would damage their prospects of getting other bank accounts. But what I've learned is this. It isn't just high-profile people with strong opinions that have been closed down by banks that have become completely politicised in the most extraordinary way. What I've learned in the 3 weeks since I came out, as it were, I've just been inundated by small businesses, by folk all around the country, people in absolute fear, terror, lives being ruined, thousands of businesses being closed. These are people who've done nothing wrong whatsoever.
Have they been given?
You've got 2 problems here. The first is the cultural problem. We've touched on that. It's the politicisation of so much of corporate Britain, the banks perhaps being the worst example. The second is this. We have a whole raft of anti-money laundering directives. Much of it came through the European Union, but whatever. As soon as it gets to the FCA, the regulator, or compliance departments, they compound things and make things worse. Yes, there's an international drugs trade that launders tens of billions of dollars every week. We know that.
Yeah.
However, the legislation in place is like a sledgehammer to miss the nut. Because we're not stopping the crooks, and we're closing down small businesses. And we've seen these banks that we bailed out, our taxes went up to bail out the banks in 2008 and 2009, and in return, they've closed 5,000 branches around the country, and they're saying to businesses, you know, some are running a fish stall.
Yes.
Sorry, we don't want cash. Well, I haven't got a credit card machine.
No.
We don't want your business. They are trying to drive cash out of the economy. Any payment that comes into your account that's unusual can lead to suspension. Say you've sold a motorbike to a French motorbike collector and a payment comes in from a French account. Alarm bells go off. And we're frankly treating the local window cleaner as if he could be a front for a Colombian drug gang.
Absolutely preposterous.
And let me tell you why it's not working, why it is a sledgehammer to miss the nut. For every £1 of laundered money recovered in the system, it costs £100 to process it. So I want to see a cultural change, but government and Parliament needs to go through the legislation. This simply isn't working. It's not just ruining lives in Britain, it's damaging business in Britain.
Are we at the point where we actually need an inquiry into this, a formal inquiry?
Well, not a parliamentary one, because that would kick it into the long grass.
How about getting a Royal Commission on it?
I would be happy to have a Royal Commission into it, provided it happened quickly.
Yeah.
The information we've got out today is that now 1,000 bank accounts a day are being closed. A day. Every single day, 1,000 people, whether it's their personal or business accounts, are being closed down. And my concern is that Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor this week, showed no comprehension of the issue whatsoever. Now, there are many things this Conservative government have done over 13 years that I profoundly disagree with. I have to say, as soon as I came out on this subject, I thought the response from Andrew Griffith, the City Minister, and indeed from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has been very, very good. We need to move incredibly quickly.
I mean, Rachel Reeves is talking about the fact that the press has apparently bullied Dame Alison...
Rose.
Sorry, I'm
right.
confusing her with Howard Davis, who I'll ask you about in a minute. The press has been bullying her. Well, no, she unfortunately leaked your personal information to somebody at the BBC.
This is identity politics. This is, because she's a woman, it's not right she's lost her job. I couldn't care less. I couldn't care less what sex she is, what gender she is. I couldn't care less what colour she is. I'm not interested. I believe in a meritocracy where you rise on ability and you're judged on what you do.
Aren't you tempted to sue NatWest and Coutts because they've given away your personal information?
Well, they've given away my personal information.
It's a breach of privacy.
They breach GDPR regulations. Also, remember...
Well, you could take them to the cleaners.
To prove my innocence, I had to publish a lot of material about me that was wrong and defamatory, you know, but I was somehow linked to Russia. Oh, I was an anti-Semite because I criticised Grant Shapps, who I'm pleased to say puts that to bed.
But
also, and there were some big sins
but will
here.
You sue
I like Ricky Gervais. It's quite serious, some of this.
It's very serious.
I don't know what I'm going to do. At some point...
Are you considering legal action against NatWest and Coutts?
Every option is on the table.
Yeah.
Every option is on the table. But the important thing is this. There are tens of thousands of people out there, maybe more, who have been wronged by the banks, whose lives have been ruined. They have had no one to speak for them. They've been suffering in silence, and that's why I've launched this website today,
tell us about that.
accountclosed.org. If you've been closed down, if you've been suspended, come and tell me who you are. Help me to help you. I want to build together a very powerful lobby group that MPs, ministers and government simply can't ignore, so we can get the changes that we need.
We've talked about some individuals. We've talked about Dame Alison Rose. We've also talked, I think, obviously he's resigned now, the head of Coutts, Peter Flavel. What about Sir Howard Davies? He's the NatWest chairman. He's once described Brexit as a tragedy, I think.
Yes.
And he doesn't he doesn't want to go early. He's retiring next year. Shouldn't he go now?
Extraordinary chap. I mean, fails at everything he does, but every failure leads to promotion to an even bigger and higher paid role. Look, joking aside, Sir Howard Davies chairs the NatWest board. That board, last Tuesday, endorsed Alison Rose staying in position despite the fact she breached the most fundamental rule of banking, that being client confidentiality. Also, Davies was the head of the regulator, the FSA as it was known at the time. Just looking at the rule book, she breached the most important principles. So mistake number one, he wanted to keep her in place. He was then forced into an embarrassing U-turn a few hours later. Mistake number two, he called her a great leader, which means she will get a £2.43 million payoff.
Should she get that
I just
payoff?
think it's almost like a club, isn't it? They're all together in the same club. I think that was wrong.
But would you dock that payment to her?
Oh, I think 2.43 million would be completely excessive. And bear in mind, you know, 38.6% of this is effectively coming from us.
Yeah, of course.
Because the taxpayer are shareholders. But worst of all, he's now said there'll be an inquiry into the leak and the closure of Farage's accounts.
Yes, this is the person who described Brexit as a tragedy, the person who's leading this investigation.
Oh, no, it's far worse than that.
Chris Hale of Travers Smith, although Howard Davies himself is a pro-Remain.
Chris Hale of Travers Smith is the emeritus chair and you know, their top man when it comes to research. He said that Brexit was xenophobic, racist and nostalgic. Almost exactly the same words written about me in the Coutts report. How on earth can this person conduct anything like an independent inquiry? And I think for all of those reasons, Howard Davies has proved himself to be unfit for office. The government should step in before the markets open tomorrow and appoint somebody new.
Now, tell me, when do you lose this banking? Because I think there's kind of a countdown time. And what actually happens? Do they hand you all of your assets in a cheque?
Well,
right, off you go.
I did write to Peter Flavel, the boss of the CEO of Coutts, back in May, and said if I can't find alternative solutions, I'll come with a Securicor van and collect the balance of my account in cash. And he chose to ignore me.
Right.
we've got a timeline of a couple of weeks. I need to have a conversation I haven't had time last week.
Yeah.
I have a conversation with the bank, a conversation with my lawyers, work out what I'm going to do next. To be honest, I've been so absorbed
Has anyone else
by
offered
this.
you banking in the background?
Not from a bank, no.
And if Coutts were to say, we've made a terrible mistake, we'll let you stay on as a customer, what would you say? I mean, I know you've got the personal banking by NatWest.
Yeah, but that doesn't solve my problems.
No.
Look, you know, I'll have a conversation with Coutts. You know, it's all well and good them saying you can stay with us, but you know, I do not want what has happened to me to happen to anybody else. And it's clear from today's newspapers, it has been happening to an awful lot of people. Yeah. I want this to be a turning point in this whole appalling behaviour from banks, whether it's high-profile figures or people running a fish stall. What has happened within this industry is wrong. It's become, frankly, self-serving, in its own interests. It's damaging Britain, and I want real change. So let's see.
Remind me of the website again, Nigel.
Accountclosed.org, and I want people...
anyone can go on there if they've had a problem with their banking in terms of them being told your account's being closed down. Go on there, and you and your people can help.
And let's find out the scale of the problem.
All right, brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on the show this morning, Nigel, and good luck with this campaign. Well, we've got plenty more to come on today's show. In just a minute, I'm going to be speaking to former Home Secretary Dame Priti Patel in a GB News exclusive.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your evening GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. As we head into a new week, we are still holding onto the unsettled theme that's been building throughout this weekend. As this area of low pressure is pushing its way in from the Atlantic, those isobars squeezing together a touch. These weather fronts as well already providing rain to parts of Wales, southern England, increasingly spreading into northern England, Northern Ireland. Could be heavy for a time. Really quite breezy around coastal areas, gusts of 35 miles per hour possible. The rain will slowly track its way up towards Scotland, but the far north of Scotland staying relatively dry and skies clear. Could turn a bit chilly as temperatures drop down there, but elsewhere a rather humid and muggy night, not dropping much below 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. There will be outbreaks of rain still across the Channel Islands, southern coast of England first thing. The winds will slowly ease their way off, but it will stay relatively breezy for many of us. Showers and longer spells of rain continuing for many locations throughout Monday. A few brighter spells trying to poke their way through at times, particularly perhaps southwest England into central areas of England and Wales. That will allow those temperatures to climb towards 20 or 22 degrees Celsius. Those showers, outbreaks of rain still lingering as we head into Tuesday as well. Some sharp ones around, particularly for Wales, southern England first thing in the morning. Again, some sunny spells trying to poke through, but where those bands merge into longer spells of rain at times, it could also be rather cloudy in places. Further wet and windy weather is also on the cards as we head towards Wednesday as well, with gales possible. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Let me introduce former Home Secretary. She needs no introduction, really, an MP for Witham, Priti Patel. Priti, thank you so much for joining
Good morning.
me today. It's quite a busy news day, so it's great to have you on. Let's just start with your reaction to what Nigel Farage was saying earlier, because I know you were listening. What do you make of this banking scandal?
Well, look, I think, first of all, we actually owe Nigel a big thank you for the way in which he's taken the lid off this whole issue. It's been going on for years. He's spoken about that. I now know colleagues are speaking about, from personal experience, about being PEPs and the difficulties they're having, politically exposed persons. But actually, I've seen this for years with my own constituents. So as a Member of Parliament for Witham in Essex, we are famously the county of entrepreneurs and we're full of SMEs.
Yeah.
I've had now for at least the last 7 years, many small businesses coming to me saying that they can't bank their own cash without literally being asked endless questions as to the authenticity of the money, the source of funds. And these are businesses that, quite frankly, they do their business in cash and they can't access their own bank accounts. They can't put money into their own accounts without literally being, given endless questions. And this has to stop. So I think there are wider issues here. Nigel has touched on many of them, and I know he's got the campaign and the website. I think actually thousands of people, quite frankly, will come out and speak about this now as well.
Do we need a wider inquiry? I talked to Nigel earlier. He said, I don't want a parliamentary inquiry. I want a public inquiry, maybe even an inquiry headed, a Royal Commission inquiry where you can have people subpoenaed to give evidence and that it's completely independent of the political system. Would you support that?
So I do. I don't think this can be left to politicians or to Parliament anymore. I genuinely feel that way.
Or the banks themselves, seemingly.
So, these are banks that were too big to fail just over 10 years ago, and they've literally got to the state where they are now, where they've been living off our money, taxpayers' money. NatWest is still owned, 38% of it by the state. So there are so many questions here. I don't think the regulators can be trusted anymore. I think there are wider inquiries that are needed about the regulatory environment that we've had, because to be quite frank, and, I'm an MP, I'm a politician, this has just been rubber stamped through Parliament year after year in finance pieces of legislation.
The Governor of the Bank of England, been more vocal on this? We've not heard a thing from him except a story today in the Sunday Times suggesting that he knew about Barclays blocking Arron Bank from banking and didn't do anything about it.
Well, I think this raises endless questions. So coming back to your conversation and this interview with Nigel, This is actually a question is, can the political establishment actually be trusted to ask the right questions, be independent, be probing, or even the establishment itself, i.e. the regulators and the Bank of England? So we have to look at this in a very, very different light. I think the wider problem that we have right now, actually, and I know we'll talk about net zero too, but these are the types of issues that are affecting ordinary people, their day-to-day lives, and this is because of the government, the state, regulation, the size of the state, and the way in which, quite frankly, institutions have been given a licence to operate in this way, and there's no scrutiny and there's no public accountability.
Let's talk about net zero because you've raised it. We've got, the government and indeed the Labour Party slightly at 6s and 7s. We had the result in Uxbridge.
Sure.
Do you put that down to a backlash against ULEZ?
So I think, look, I've been involved in many political campaigns, way over the last decade, and I was involved in the previous London mayor elections as well. So places like Uxbridge, classic constituency, places like Bexley as well. You got Olivia in Bexley this morning. Outer London boroughs that, quite frankly, are having things done to them, policies imposed upon them with a complete disregard to residents, local people, without the accountability.
Local councils kind of operating in an arbitrary manner, because I suppose the criticism that will come back to you is, well, you were once a member of the government.
Sure.
The government's been one pushing all of these...
It's twofold.
Is it too much now? This target, I know it's been loosened from 2030 to achieve net zero to 2050.
Sure.
But there's a lot of prevarication right now among Tories to say, should we be doing this at all? Should we, Pretty?
So, well, first of all, my views on this are that actually we need to pause all this activity. 2030 is not that far away. In a, click of fingers, 2050 will be upon us.
Yeah.
The public are not ready for this. And importantly, we cannot just have the state, the government, central government just sort of saying across, again, institutions, local councils, county councils, these are the targets that you have to meet when we don't have the technology, we're not ready. Now, if we want a sensible conversation about climate and the impact of climate change, recognising there are problems is one thing, absolutely, but making sure that we have the tools and the ability that doesn't impose costs and taxes on ordinary people. This is a space that we have to be in.
Are you worried?
And we're not in that space at all.
Are these policies impoverishing poorer people in your constituency?
Across the board. So, yes, I'm out of London, I'm in Essex, but it's mission creep. All of this is about mission creep. How these policies are just being rolled out. Boundaries are being pushed more and more. My county council is talking about net zero. All local authorities are. Now, they can talk about it, but stop spending our money, quite frankly, when public funds need to be targeted and spent on issues, on public service delivery, first and foremost, statutory services. And we cannot keep having these policies just blindly imposed upon taxpayers, upon my constituents and the public, without full thought and consideration given in terms of the practicalities and what this means.
When you say a pause, do you agree with a pause then on the ban on future sales of petrol and diesel cars?
Yeah, 100% I do, completely.
These were all, you were a big supporter of Boris Johnson.
Sure, I was in his government, of course.
He was pushing a lot of this. You say about supporting his mayoral candidacy back in the day. ULEZ was originally his idea, right? So, has he made a mistake?
So the point is, right, governments and politicians are making decisions and have made decisions. Now, it's a case of whether or not they're practical, whether or not they're achievable and whether or not they're deliverable. The default position, quite frankly, of all governments, and I mean this, of all governments over the last 20 years, is that, we can just spend public money to chase targets. We have to stop that. That is a corrosive culture. And actually, it's no different, Camilla, to banking, corporate life, corporate governance that is going on in our country right now. Everyone's too busy subscribing to targets and ticking boxes, rather than thinking about the practical implications. I saw also, there's a lot of news out there right now, but I saw Lord Hammond give an interview as well, Philip Hammond, a former Chancellor, raising similar concerns that why is it that decisions are made in a vacuum? And I think we have to go back and peel the layer of the onion of political thinking and decision-making as well. These decisions are made in isolation of the overall impact on the British people. And if nothing else, politicians are there to govern for the British public, the British people, not just make decisions, but serve them as well, look after their interests. And net zero is running away. This is a train that is moving at such pace where the technology isn't in place, where the public are being left behind, and where the public are now being taxed and being forced to pay for these decisions that actually they're having no say off, and they're the ones feeling the implications.
I wonder if we might find a rare moment where you agree with Tony Blair, who was speaking in the week and saying, well, look, you know, the British are actually doing their best, but there's very little they can do in the face of what's going on in China.
I do agree with that. I completely agree with that. So I think it was last year, or actually I think it was the year before, when we had the big COP meeting in Glasgow, for example. Now, convening the world, actually, we're quite good at convening, but we have to, you know, actually get others to step up to their commitments as well. We're an island country. We always have been. We are leaders and good leaders across the world and the globe in many areas. But right now, our priority, and I think this even more so now, Britain post-Brexit, we have to look after our nation, our country. We have to do what's right for our people. We have to make sure, yes, even on technology, I think we've got a lot going on in technology, for example. Yes. You know, on green initiatives and in net zero. I mean, you know, it's the Belgian Grand Prix today. If you look at the technology in Formula One cars, much of that emanates out of the United Kingdom. We have a massive
industry. So we're leading
industry
on the technology.
Here. We're doing well in technology, but it has to be affordable and applicable to the British public. And it's not just things that we can just talk about internationally and nationally. And other countries, we can't compete with China, for example,
I must ask
India.
you about immigration, because, you know, obviously this quest to stop the boats hasn't necessarily happened. The Rwanda plan so far hasn't resulted in anyone being actually sent to Rwanda. Why has this gone wrong? People might point the finger of you, you know, in your previous job.
Of course.
Why wasn't this nettle grasped? What's your successor doing wrong and why is this failing?
So I think, first of all, look, every government, and I've been there, you know, I've been there, got the T-shirt on this, we had a plan, and that plan was called the New Plan for Immigration. That was very much about being firm and having deterrents in place. You know, if we're going to, this isn't just stopping the boats is one aspect, but it's illegal migration. I differentiated between legal migration and illegal migration. Illegal migration is something that we all want to stop, and that means all fair-minded people want to stop the evil people traffickers and the terrible things that they're doing in exploitation.
It's not working right. Lefty lawyers, intervention from...
So many things, so many things. Lefty lawyers are one aspect of this, you know, so government needs to clamp down. That's the Attorney General, that's the Lord Chancellor on the way these legal firms behave. That's been going on for years, and, you know, all governments have not done enough on that. But if I just step backwards to go forwards on this, the New Plan for Immigration, as we had outlined, basically said we need to have detention centres, accommodation centres for people that come here. That in its own right acts as a deterrent. You process their claims there, and then when their claims fail, you send them back to their country of origin.
Plan? Has it been
torn up? The government has moved forwards now with a different plan. They've got their own immigration legislation.
And what do you think of the different plan?
So the legislation has only gone through Parliament just now, so they now have to implement this. And Camilla, you know this, you write about this. The clock is ticking and the public are not seeing change. And the problem the government now has is that the stories are all about accommodation. They've made all the stories about buying tents, about Wethersfield, RAF Wethersfield, which is in Braintree district, in my district. You know, we've got a judicial review against the government because we feel that that plan is the wrong plan. And actually it's now affecting our local community. We've got a public health outbreak, for example.
So it sounds like you think that the Home Office, since you left, has been mishandling this issue.
So they've taken a different approach. They have taken a different approach. I think I am. No, because it's hard, and I'm not going to criticise my colleagues because these are tough decisions. Well, it's hard. There's no one single solution to this, but we need a deterrent factor for a start. And removals and returns. My Rwanda plan was central to that. The returns agreements that, you know, I have put in place and others are now putting in place. We have to get planes leaving the country and show that if you come here illegally, you can't just get a free pass. Being firm is actually the stance that we should take, and that means removing people and returning people to other third countries or country of origin. But also at the same time, we have to go after the people traffickers. So the laws that I put in place mean that we can now give life sentences to people traffickers. You know, you have to literally get all these elements to work together.
A quick word on legal migration, because we found out that was 600,000, I think, in the last year. Would you like to see a cap on those numbers? Well, and if you would, what would it be?
So I'm not going to do the numbers game because I don't think that's appropriate. So the numbers are high, and we have to remember why they're high. Ukraine, Afghanistan. I was involved in both of those, and Hong Kong. I was the one that set up the BNO.
Them to come down, then?
I think they will come down.
Okay.
But Camilla, just a final word on migration issues and legal migration as well. Points-based immigration system is effectively what we said we would deliver for the British public as part of our manifesto commitments, Britain post-Brexit. That means the brightest and the best come into our country where we have demands. Now, what we have to continue to do, and I don't think we're doing enough on this is a challenge for all governments. We still have to grow our own domestic skills base and make sure our labour market is match fit and fit for purpose, meet the productivity challenges that we face, all these big issues. We've got a long way to go there. And until we fix those domestic issues, net migration will continue to be high. We'll still be taking people from elsewhere around the world. NHS, social care, technologies. The banking sector famously relies on a lot of people with technology skills to run a lot of the systems over here.
Let's have a little word before you have to go. Time always runs away when we have these sorts of chats. But on Toryism itself, obviously the by-election overall saw the support for the Conservatives drop by 21%. It's not looking great for the next general election for the Conservatives. I think there's also been some concern about some of the candidacy selection and whether they're right-wing enough. You worried about the future of Conservatism in this country?
I'm a grassroots Conservative first and foremost. I care about my party and I care about the country and I care about centre-right politics. I really do. I want to see the next generation of centre-right Conservatives come forward. You know, we'll have a general election.
Have we had CCHQ selecting too many Liberal Democrats?
My personal view is that we've had too much centralisation. As you know, I'm actively involved in the Conservative Democratic Organisation. I believe in more democracy in our party. I believe in our grassroots having a say, a proper say, a fair, a right and proper say in terms of the selection of their candidates and the people that become MPs. And they want to hear people that are authentic, that care about public service, that will stand up for their country, and not people that want to use politics or being an MP as a stepping stone to another career.
Do you think that's happened too much in the past?
So I can tell you now, I was approached last year by many Conservative MPs that basically said, you know, if I lose my seat, can you help me get a job? You know, you've had a career outside of politics. And I think that's wrong. I've told them this, by the way. I believe that politics is about public service and putting people first and, you know, putting your country first as well. And I want to see more Conservatives who are passionate about that come forward.
And what do you think the chances are, finally, of the Tories winning in 2024?
So, look, I'm an optimist about this because, quite frankly, no one can do crystal gazing.
No.
If we come together, this is really important. We've got to come together, be united and actually stand up for core Conservative values and beliefs and put the public at the heart of all of that, then we can. We need to be on their side. And the challenge that we have, Camilla, is that we have been in office for 13 years and the public are going to start to feel slightly, well, you know, you've had your chance, why didn't you do this?
So what, give them a reason to fall back in love with Toryism?
And we have to, and that's being on their side, standing up for them. We showed it in Uxbridge, which obviously was about you, Les, very much so, but giving them voice, giving them heart and confidence that we believe in them is absolutely what we must do.
Priti Patel, thank you so much for joining me in the studio this morning. Lovely to speak to you.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan Tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. Lovely to have your company this morning. Now, let's get Labour's view on everything that we've been discussing so far. Barry Gardiner, the MP for Brent North since 1997, joins me now. Sorry, does that make you
make me
Barry?
very old, yes.
My goodness me. Well, it's a tribute to your wisdom and experience on such matters.
Indeed.
Let's kick off with the banking farrago, as I'm calling it, with Nigel Farage. I'm a bit confused by Labour's position, because we've had Rachel Reeves on one hand saying, oh, the press are bullying Dame Alison Rose out of her job as NatWest CEO. I think Starmer seems to be supportive of Farage's quest to try and find out what's going on. He's come on the show this morning and says that he thinks 1,000 bank accounts a day are being closed down. I mean, I'd imagine as a long-standing Labour MP, that makes you pretty uncomfortable.
Look, make the most of this, Camilla,
yes.
Because one time only, you will hear me being supportive of Nigel Farage, OK?
Great to hear. Arch Remainer Barry Gardiner, make a note of this.
Not on Brexit, right? But no, look, banking is something that is vital to everybody's life in the UK.
Yeah.
And if it can be arbitrarily taken away from you, that is not right. And I think what happened to Nigel Farage was wrong. And I think what's going on underneath that in terms of the way in which banks treat their customers really does need investigated. I want to put a proviso to that. And that is that we in London have unfortunately become a centre for money laundering.
Yeah.
And we know that. It's come from Russia, it's come from a lot of places, and you only have to look at the number of very plush apartments, you know, in Kensington, South Kensington area, that there are no lights on in the evening to know that it's money laundering that is funding those as an investment for the future, right? We need to deal with money laundering, but the way in which the banks are doing this is actually victimising ordinary people. So I think we do need an investigation.
And yet
it does need to be sorted
it was
out.
Alison Rose that was being victimised. She made a mistake on that.
It's for you to ask Rachel about her own
We would love
view.
to have Rachel Reeves on this show.
well,
she isn't as open to doing GB News as you are, Barry.
Well, I've always believed that, you know, the people that you need to talk to are the people who are less likely to vote for you, because that way I can persuade your audience to come and vote for
Barry
me.
Gardiner, amen to that. Now, let's talk about voters and what they think of you, Les. I'm particularly interested in your view, because I know your constituency of Brent North is kind of on the border of the extension, so people are going to be driving out of their homes in Brent North straight into a 12.50 charge. Are you a supporter or
They
not?
already do,
Okay.
because they cross the North Circular. But look, I'm a huge supporter of ULEZ.
Really?
And yes, absolutely. I'm a huge supporter of the ULEZ for a very good reason. This is a public health issue. And, you know, whether it's ULEZ, whether it's climate change, the question you've got to ask yourself is, how much are you prepared to steal from your own children? Because that's what's going on. If you have a child that grows up within 100 metres of a main polluting road, that's 10,000 vehicle movements a day, that child grows up with a lung capacity impaired by up to 1/3. Now, if you're prepared to do that to your children, fine. Back the campaign against the ULEZ.
Anyway, if we've got a ban on new petrol and diesels, and we're all persuaded
That's
to buy...
2030,
yeah, but
Camilla,
that's only
and it's
7 years.
new.
It's only
and
7 years.
No, but it's new petrol and diesel vehicles.
What about your constituents? Aren't they worried about being multiply taxed? You know, you've got the motorists being taxed when they buy their petrol, when they're actually taxed. Obviously, they pay money for their tax disc. They're being taxed, perhaps secondarily, because they might have to get a residence parking permit. They then drive through an LTN and they get fined, they get taxed. They go to the centre of London, they have to pay a congestion charge, they get taxed. Now it's going to be extended so that you're basically paying an extra tax just to get around Greater London. I mean, there is a very strong argument to suggest that this is making the poor poorer. And as a Labour MP, I didn't think you'd be happy with that.
Camilla, who has caused the cost of living crisis? Liz Truss, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, £40 billion off our economy. Who promised
That's not got anything to do with you, Les, though, because Sadiq Khan came up with this ages ago.
Sorry, Sadiq Khan came up with it. You yourself said earlier on the programme...
extension.
Yeah, you yourself... Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because it was Boris that initiated the ULEZ, as you well know. And actually... Yes, I do.
Okay.
I support that.
But
hang on.
Decided to extend.
No. Let's go back to Grant Shapps, because you know very well that in the negotiations at the time of COVID, the negotiations with TfL, it was Grant Shapps who insisted that it was an obligation on TfL to expand the ULEZ. Okay. Now, the government believes that this is the right thing to do. They believe that it's right to support scrappage schemes because they're giving £230 million to Birmingham, to Bristol, to Oxford for their scrappage schemes. What they're not doing is giving a penny piece to Londoners. Now, so I've got a question for the government, and that's why are you not giving...
And up to £9,500 for vans. I looked it up last week.
Yeah.
So are you saying that there should be more money for the scrappage scheme?
What I'm saying, there should be more people who are eligible for it, precisely in the way that you're
This
suggesting.
is Angela Rayner's concern.
Precisely what you're saying.
Unaffordable. She said it's not affordable for Londoners. And I think that was echoed by Wes Streeting.
Well, I'm sorry. Let's be absolutely clear. The government could give the money to London that they have given elsewhere. The reason that they have not done so is they wanted to use the ULEZ as a political stick to beat the mayor with, the London mayor with.
I mean, politically that's kind of worked, hasn't it? Because would you agree that Uxbridge was retained by the Tories on the back of the backlash against the ULEZ?
Well, you see, I would have liked us to have been much firmer in our support of ULEZ in Uxbridge.
But you're not saying that Khan is doing this against his will. He wants to expand it.
It's the right thing to do. I absolutely believe that this is about public health. Don't take the politicians' word for it. Listen to what the British Heart and Lung Foundation are saying. Listen to what all the doctors are saying. Listen to what the medical experts are saying. They say it's 4,500 deaths a year that are caused prematurely by air pollution, and it can be solved by ULEZ.
As you say, when you're talking about children's lives, it does give the other perspective, even though politically this seems to be a bit of a hot potato. Thank you very much for joining me this morning, Barry Gardiner. As I say, the MP for Brent North since 1997, but we don't say that at all to make him feel old. Now, don't go anywhere, because I'm going to be speaking to Andrew Reid, who has written the inside story of the Brexit Party. We'll be back before you know it.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. Now, sometimes we do plug books which we think are of interest to you, the viewers and the listeners, and it's this one by Andrew Reid, who's the author of The Inside Story of the Brexit Party. It's called The Art of the Impossible, How to Start a Political Party. The mind boggles, frankly, Andrew, but tell me about how you got involved in the Brexit Party. What intrigues me about that whole movement is that the Brexit Party did so well, and it was very representational of society at large, and it didn't quite get the criticism that was attracted to UKIP back in the day. Why was that?
Well, that was because when we planned to set it up, it was going to cross all political spectrums.
Yeah.
So in simpler words, it was not going to be there as representing one party, but actually representing the views of actually the 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit.
Might be lefties, might be righties, might be somewhere in between.
Well, I mean, you know, we had Mrs. Fox, as she was known then.
Yeah, Claire Fox, yeah.
Claire Fox. So we had people of every political colour. It didn't make any difference. But if they believed in Brexit, then they were very welcome to join or participate in bringing about the success that the Brexit Party brought about, only to be let down, sadly.
Yes, well, let's get on to that in a minute. But when you say about the art of the impossible in setting the party up, just how difficult was it? I mean, we just heard from Nigel about the kind of debanking scandal, this culture that has permeated of, if you don't agree with me, then you're cancelled. How difficult was it to get this off the ground?
Well, if you look at, I'm going to say, page 29 in the book, there we are, how many years ago now? 4 or 5 years ago, where we couldn't get a bank account, right? Exactly that.
Yeah.
Because we were effectively a thorn that no bank wanted to have. And eventually, when the reform, or Brexit reform, got a bank account, it had it cancelled, I think, about a year later. So,
and at the time, presumably, the suspicion was because it was this kind of politically exposed argument that, or did you think it was the establishment trying to shut down people who had pro-Brexit sympathies?
well, I think it was the latter.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is, UKIP was impregnated by MI5. We were effectively, in the form of the Brexit Party, were the last thing they wanted to appear on the horizon.
Yeah.
But it was too short a period for anyone to be able to get inside it. But yes, there were a lot of problems in setting up a party. I mean, you've got so many. You've got the physical organisation, then the organisation of people.
Yes.
And then the hardest thing is dealing with the Electoral Commission, who were totally against us.
Can we talk about Nigel's role in it all? I mean, how pivotal was he? And does he need to get more involved in reform, as the Brexit Party is now known?
That's a decision that he will make.
I know, but
not
it might
for
give
me.
him a bit of rocket fuel.
Yeah, he is rocket fuel. Look, Nigel has a following of about 5 million people. Like it or like it not, the Conservatives, and for that matter any other party, has to accept that. Because he is a conviction politician.
Yeah.
We have so few of them who actually believe in what they are saying and believe in talking to people. Nigel can talk to someone who has a completely opposite view to his own and listen, whereas most politicians now are only put in set positions and are not able to cope with any form of argument against what they've been told to say.
What's your analysis of Rishi Sunak, briefly?
My analysis is that he's a good man who hasn't quite worked out where he needs to be.
Where do you think he needs to be?
I think he needs to get back to some proper Conservative values. I mean, I think the Conservatives have achieved in the last 12 years more than any Labour government would have achieved.
Yeah, in high spending and high tax.
Exactly, all of that. And when you now have a situation where 52% of the working population work for the state, this is getting very frightening.
Now, I'm going to be back next week at 9:30, still the only political show on a Sunday morning.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your evening GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. As we head into a new week, we are still holding onto the unsettled feeling that's been building throughout this weekend as this area of low pressure is pushing its way in from the Atlantic, those ice bars squeezing together a touch. These weather fronts as well already providing rain to parts of Wales, southern England, increasingly spreading into northern England, Northern Ireland. Could be heavy for a time. Really quite breezy around coastal areas, gusts of 35 miles per hour possible. The rain will slowly track its way up towards Scotland, but the far north of Scotland staying relatively dry and skies clear. Could turn a bit chilly as temperatures drop down there, but elsewhere a rather humid and muggy night, not dropping much below 15 or 16 degrees Celsius. There will be outbreaks of rain still across the Channel Islands, southern coast of England first thing. The winds will slowly ease their way off, but it will stay relatively breezy for many of us. Showers and longer spells of rain continuing for many locations throughout Monday. A few brighter spells trying to poke their way through at times, particularly perhaps southwest England into central areas of England and Wales. That will allow those temperatures to climb towards 20 or 22 degrees Celsius. Those showers, outbreaks of rain still lingering as we head into Tuesday as well. Some sharp ones around, particularly for Wales, southern England first thing in the morning. Again, some sunny spells trying to poke through, but where those bands merge into longer spells